It's the Champion Sports Chat podcast brought to you in association with Backballer. Check out backballer.com for more. Hello and welcome along to another edition of the Champion Sports Chat podcast, where we round up all your sporting action from the weekend and take a little look ahead of what's come in the paper. And we've got a special guest planned for the later part of this week's podcast, so do stay tuned for that. In studio this evening we have got former referee and Aero clubman Rory Hickey, and we've also got Clare Champion editor Peter O'Connell joining myself, Derek Lynch, to look back on what was predominantly, I guess, a football weekend, both men's and ladies action, a little bit of camogie as well. We've got senior championship in the camogie to look forward to next weekend, but we'll focus mostly, I guess, on the football and the couple of issues that arose over the weekend. Let's start though with the on-field stuff, I guess, lads. Rory, in terms of results that stand out, I guess a lot were kind of predictable in the main. Unfair to say Aero beating Cratloe was a surprise, but the manner of the victory somewhat, or even the manner of the defeat, depending on what side of the coin you look at.
But it's not unfair to say it was surprising, because Aero hadn't played, it was their first game, so we didn't really know what to expect from them, but they acquitted themselves well and they did very well. Cratloe, for me, were a little bit disappointing. A game that I thought would either go one way or the other heavily, but it was a close fought thing all the way up to the end, and Aero came out a couple of points the right side of the result, thank God.
Yeah, there he can say it now with his Aero hat well and truly on, that new haircut. I guess though, was it a surprise that Cratloe looked a little bit flat at times? And we'll talk about the pitch in a while, because that was obviously a talking point as well. We thought we were on Spanish Point Beach for a couple of minutes, but they just looked, I thought, bereft of ideas at times. Now Aero were very well set up. Matchups were spot on. Conor Brennan, particularly on Colin McInerney, he really came out on top there, and Carl Darcy really shackling Podge as well. So they got that right. Powered through the centre, and classy forwards up front, Gavin Cooney with those 10 points. But all that put to one side, what Cratloe offered in response, I was just expecting a little more.
By half time, I expected a total change around from Cratloe. I expected one of their bigger men to go in full forward, but they never switched it up. I thought they'd go long a bit and put some of their nippier forwards in around the lad of the Cooney side full forward, but they didn't. They went sharp with their kickouts. They persisted with that. And how many turnovers did Aero make at the weekend? I reckon they scored 6 or 7 points from turnovers from their kickouts alone. But what you said is correct. Aero did get their matchups right. I thought young Darcy did a great job. I wouldn't like to owe him money. I'd say he'd follow you around the town for the few bob or whatever, but he did a great job on Podge. Podge was limited. Now, he did get a couple of scores, Podge, and they were quality ones, but he was tightly marked all day. Very good he was. And
those 3 points came kind of late enough. It was certainly into the last quarter of the game, so I mean, Cahill in the main coming out on top there. Aero will build on this. I was listening to Paul Madden in the huddle after the game, and he was very much pushing the reset button, because it's an ironic one in that while Cratloe lost yesterday, their scoring difference has seen them through. No matter what way Aero Clondigad goes, they'll still go through. It's just that group winner to be decided. So pretty important for Paul to kind of refocus the mind straight away, I felt.
Well, it was, and a bit of relief, I thought, in his voice after the game. After last year, there was a bit of disappointment on Clonroad Moor. They thought there was a little more in the group, but they've circled the wagons, they've come strong, they've a lot of training done, these lads, and they look really fit, really fit. Like, the unsung hero from yesterday's game was Evan Courtney. Oh my God, the pace of the man was absolutely unbelievable, and he knew what to do when he got the ball every time. He headed straight for goal. Cratloe just couldn't handle him. He mightn't have scored that much, but I thought he was Aero's man of the match. I know young Cooney scored 8 or 9 points, but I thought Courtney was unbelievable yesterday.
Courtney was actually involved in, I think, nearly 90% of what Aero scored, which is a phenomenal statistic. And as you mentioned, he was that danger man. Peter, for Cratloe, I was just thinking about this last night. I was wondering, was it in the back of the heads that maybe they were in a good position to qualify? They're in the middle of a 3 or 4 week run here, but now coming into the Kilmaley hurling game off the back of 2 defeats, did that play on the minds? I wonder, is that schedule starting to catch up?
Yeah, we've spoken about it a lot. It probably is something of a contributing factor, but I do think for both the Cratloe footballers and obviously, of course, for the Cratloe hurlers, which are virtually the same group of people, this weekend coming is going to be absolutely decisive. If they get through this weekend, suddenly, morale, confidence, everything is, they're facing into training next week really on a high, and you can do all the talking in the world about putting a defeat behind you and all that kind of stuff, but you don't really put a defeat behind you until you win a game that really counts. and this game really, really counts. What you're saying about the game against Éireog, I think it counted as well, but when you know at the back of your mind that if you lose a game, you're not out, it probably does soften things a bit. They're a very experienced group. I'm certain they would have been trying to win the game without a doubt, but very hard to get up to that pitch every single week with virtually the same group of players at senior club level in two different sports.
Yeah, because just I suppose in the scoring difference side of things, I think Cratloe were plus 11 or something like that going into yesterday's game, and they're still thereabouts, so they can't be overtaken, as you said, they're through. But if you're Éireog now, or I suppose more importantly, if you're Clondegad, you're looking now at saying, right, we have to beat these fellas by 8 points, I think it is, to go through. I mean, that's a savage victory to have to put up. I mean, Éireog.
Well, it is, and it means goals. If you want to win a game by 8 points, it means scoring goals. So Clondegad, they'll be out around Ballyer and out around Ballinackelly, and they'll be coming to lads' houses and be going, how are we going to score goals against these lads? You could be sure they were all in the park there yesterday watching. So how are they going to set up? Maybe try Gary Brennan, the full forward for the full game, and pump ball in and see what you can get off it. It's a massive ask to win. Like, to win a game is hard, but to win a game by 8 points to stay in the competition is huge. So they'll have to come up with some plan, and Éireog will have to be ready to counteract that. Now, Peter, you spoke about the psychological side of it and the softening of Cratloe still being in it. I hope Éireog don't fall into that trap, knowing that they have an 8-point cushion starting and they just forget to play, or they just forget to bring the same intensity that they brought yesterday. But was it yourself that spoke to Paul after the game? He's a smart guy. He's smart fellas with him, and I'm sure they'll be ready for Clondegad the next day. Yeah,
because obviously they've got big hurling commitments coming up this weekend as well, and we know we mentioned Cathal Darcy. He'll be playing against Cratloe again, only this time obviously for Kilmaley, but Éireog probably don't have the same level of crossover in terms of hurling.
Yeah, I spoke about that yesterday. Not the same level. I think there's 5 or 6 maybe open to correction, maybe 7 at a stretch, but there's not the same crossover that Cratloe have. Cratloe seem to leave down the footballs and pick up the hurley straight away week on week, but Éireog don't have that, so 75% of the players will get a rest, whereas the lads, as you said, they're playing week in, week out as well,
The condition at Cusack Park Road yesterday was a massive talking point for patrons coming out. I mean, it's what the public were saying. We have to reflect that, obviously, but we could see clearly that the pitch has been sanded. I know we've had an awful lot of rain recently, and maybe there is remedial work done, but for a senior championship football game,
Look, Derek, pitch maintenance is pitch maintenance. The field has to be maintained. But after 5-7 minutes, it was obvious from where we were in the commentary box that lads in parts of the field could not hop the ball. It physically didn't come back up, like playing on the beach. You're playing with your kids on the beach and you hop the ball and it stays in the sand. It was like that in sections. It was unbelievable. So you could see the mentors on both sides legging up and down the sideline, telling fellas, toe to hand. You could hear him physically. Tom Russell was sick of screaming out at fellas, don't hop the ball. And for senior football championship, I just thought it wasn't good enough,
Yeah, I was mentioning something, it probably needed a little touch up. We know there's a very heavy schedule there next weekend with the 4 hurling games, but it probably didn't impact on the result, but still not something that you'd want every week.
No. I suppose on the county board side of it, they're lucky it was a football match this week and not a hurling match, because I don't think you'd have been able to hurl with the amount of sand that was on the field. But hopefully now with a bit of rain that beds in, and it looked pristine from the stand from our position where we were, but it became obvious as you saw lads running that the sand was flying up behind them. I said their legs are a little more tired. It was kind of like running on the beach at stages there yesterday.
Yeah, they won't mind. They've got the win in the bag, obviously, Peter. We'll move back west in terms of the games we'll talk about next, and we'll go to Clare first. County champions Milltown, very comfortable winners against Kilrush. It kind of feeds into something else we'll be talking about shortly as well in terms of officials and all that, but on the field, I guess Milltown doing what they had to do, really underlining the class between senior and intermediate champions.
Without a doubt. I think that was one of the disappointing things about the weekend, that some of the games were very, very one-sided. They weren't really what you'd expect of a competitive championship, and even though there was 5 clubs relegated last year, you'd have to ask the question, should people look again at even cutting the senior championship to less than 12 clubs? I know it's 13 with the amalgamation, but because there's no point in kind of trying to ignore the fact that some of the clubs at senior level are still not competitive. It wasn't competitive when there were 16. It's not competitive now either when there's 13, and that was a good example. Kilrush coming up from intermediate last year. Now you wouldn't expect realistically Kilrush to beat Milltown, but Kilmahil in the first game against Milton in that group really did kind of really put it up to them, and had a chance of maybe even winning that game. Was
it just a bad day for Kilrush, you think? Or
No, you could just see that. No, they were missing a couple of players. They were missing a couple of players. Stephen Ryan, the county goalkeeper, injured his hamstring, I think, at training on Wednesday evening, so he was out. He would have been a big addition. Didn't have Rory O'Connor. They had Ross Phelan just back after a long time out. He hadn't much training done. Did a great chance of a goal after a couple of minutes. Liam Madigan really should have put it away. Very good save from Sean O'Brien, I have to say, with his left leg, deflected it. And a few minutes after that, Liam Madigan caught a great ball, and instead of going straight for goal, he turned back outfield, and he just couldn't get away, So they had a couple of, especially the first chance, an early chance of a goal, but once Miltown got control, Gerard O'Brien
against the county champions, if you get a chance earlier on, they're the ones you really have to take.
That's it, Gerard O'Brien was playing centre forward for most of the first half. I think he was put midfield eventually, but he spent a lot of his time tracking Gordon Kelly. So instead of Gerard O'Brien did make a couple of good runs. In fairness to him, he was doing his best. There wasn't lack of effort, but I just thought maybe they could have maybe put him closer to goal and have more of a threat inside, closer to goal. He had to work as hard going back down the field, keeping an eye on Gordon Kelly as he tried to do going forward. And you need him in the other team's half of the field. You don't need him tracking back. You want him in the part of the field where he could, maybe do something. But Miltown, without being brilliant, Miltown weren't brilliant. They were very effective, controlled the game, held possession very, very well. One thing you notice about them, their communication, their on-field communication is very good. They kind of really, exactly where you're supposed to be, and if you're not where you're supposed to be, you've some fella straight away on your back telling you where you should be.
That probably comes from experience and confidence, doesn't it? That you can kind of be that sure in yourself to do that.
It does, definitely. And if you have a couple of championship medals as a group, there's probably high expectations. Everyone is whether you're coming in at 18 or 19, or whether you're Gordon Kelly, well into his 30s. There's the same level is probably expected of each person.
Is it safe to say after 2 rounds they're still the team to beat? And who will come close to them?
I think so. I was talking to Horst Maloney during the game, and I was saying to Horst, I hope that at some stage that Kilmurray and Miltown meet in a knockout game, because I just like to see what will happen there now,
Rory's smiling now as an ex-ref that's been in the middle there. He knows that'll be lively.
Usually my name used to go after that fixture, but now it's someone else's problem.
I think the top, the top 4 or 5, just not much between them. I mean, you definitely would expect, I think, Innis Diamond to be there or thereabouts. Erogue after the weekend. There's, whoever gets Cratloe in the quarter final, it's going to be a tough one. And then someone like maybe Dunbeg could pull out one big performance. They're playing Clare this weekend. Clare very disappointed at the weekend too. A lot of very disappointed people at that game in Clare on Sunday, talking about the game the day before against Innis Diamond. They were totally outclassed.
Yeah, we've got lots and lots of issues to talk about, folks. I'm just conscious of giving it all that enough time. So go and make a cup of tea. We're going to take a little break here, get all our little notes together. We'll be back very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere. We've loads to get through. It's the Champion Sports Chat podcast, brought to you in association with Backballer. Check out backballer.com for more. Welcome back to the second part of this week's Champion Sports Chat podcast. Rory Hickey and Peter O'Connell joining myself, Derek Lynch, here in studio. We were talking about probably game by game, I guess, before the break in terms of the Clare Senior Football Championship. We've mentioned the fact that there was a lot of one-sided results, perhaps Kilmahil and then the West Clare amalgamation, very competitive. Cratloe, Erogue for times as well. A lot of one-sided ones we mentioned. Innis Diamond walking past Clare. Kilmurray very convincing winners over Corofin, and obviously Miltown against Kilrush as well. Just to pick up on a point that Peter made there before the break, Rory, in terms of the amount of teams in the senior championship. It's a talking point. I heard a lot of people at the weekend talking about that. And just to give people an update as well in terms of the relegation situation with the amalgamation, it's on the Clare Champion website. The latest news on that, Joe Cooney telling us that it will be talked about next Tuesday night at the county board meeting. Still up in the air after 2 rounds as to how that's going to work. The master fixture notes say that the group team essentially exempt from relegation. County Secretary Pat Fitzgerald stating on numerous occasions that in his opinion he doesn't really go along with that. So it's certainly a talking point as it looks at the moment. The amalgamation will finish second or finish bottom, I should say. Kilmehel, Kilrush, that's a straight shootout for second place, but also to avoid the relegation. So there's an awful lot to be ironed out there. Just on that point first, Rory, I guess it's disappointing that it's come to this 2 rounds in. We still don't know. It feels like this whole amalgamation thing was just rushed through a little bit. I don't think it was ironed out the way it should have been.
In principle, it's a great idea. I heard Joe Gary the weekend, he's manager of that amalgamation, speaking about it, and in principle it's a good idea, but now it looks like the amalgamation are going to be in relegation trouble. And how do you relegate an amalgamated team of 2 intermediate teams, 2 intermediate? You can't have the amalgamation, playing against their own crowd. So I don't know how they're going to sort it out. Is an amalgamation exempt? Maybe it is, I don't know.
But then you have the point where, and this is, I guess, the sticking point, just for argument's sake, well, if Kilmehel or Kilrush lose that game, whichever, it doesn't really matter. They've both beaten the amalgamation.
They have.
So they'll finish above them, but still be effectively below them in terms of dropping into it. So that's a kind of a double sickener as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe like this should have been cleared up before we started the championship, so people knew where they stood, teams knew where they stood. But as you said, next Tuesday night it'll be interesting. I think there'll be a few of us standing down the back of the hall for that one.
Yeah, or maybe up the front to make sure that we have our notes correct for the paper the following week. Peter, a 10-team championship with 2 groups of 5, 4 championship group games, and then you go on to a quarter-final, semi-final or relegation. Guaranteed 5 games for club players. Competitive. Is that the way to go? Because I agree with you. There's not 12 clubs. I'd argue if there's even 10, but I think you need 10 to make it a proper championship. Fellas want more games, 5 championship games.
You definitely can't play with less than 10, I'd say.
But you wouldn't sniff at that, 5 guaranteed games.
Something like that would be better. I preferred, even though this is going to sound now like a massive contradiction, I preferred the system last year. I preferred the hurling system.
Peter, you've never contradicted yourself before.
There was one time there. But I prefer the hurling system, but and that's the way the football worked for the last couple of years. The way it is now, there isn't 12 senior clubs, and I know that it's only been cut by 5, and people might be saying, well, give it a couple of years. And look, it probably has to be given a second year, but too many of the games are just not competitive.
But also the buy thing, I think, is kind of, I think it dampens it a small bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Even Paul Madden referenced it yesterday that we've already had round 1, but we're waiting another 2 weeks.
Waiting in the wings, yeah. It does dampen it a little bit. If you went back to 10, 2 groups of 5, you have a full round. Everyone's playing that day, or at least over that weekend.
And then you could have your top 2 go to a semi-final, 2 and 3 for a quarter-final, and the bottom 2 to relegation. So there would be no dead rubbers. Like, there would be most likely something on every game.
Derek has it sorted out there. No need for a Tuesday night.
But it's actually a good idea, Derek. Yeah?
Don't sound so surprised, Peter. Like this is.
I mean, it's a small bit surprising. But no, I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, everyone should be playing the same weekend all the time and keep it as even as possible, because the way it is currently constituted isn't working, so there's no point in letting on it is.
So if this was to be introduced for next year, it'd nearly have to be sorted out at next Tuesday night's meeting, so you can organise your relegation to bring the championship down from 12 to 10.
Yeah. And I know there'd be knock on obviously for the intermediate championship, and that would mean a restructuring there as well. But I mean, you look at the intermediate championship we have now at the moment, I think it's been hugely competitive. There's been some really, really good games, and teams are now playing at their level. Like, you look at Clare, and I know there'll be people back there who wouldn't agree with this, but that wasn't a senior performance. I mean, they haven't won a game all year. They're really struggling for confidence. Corofin, Lissi are going to play off for a quarter-final spot. The losers will go into the relegation side of things as well. It's
tough for those clubs.
I'd rather, and maybe this is just me, but I'd rather be competitive at another level than being senior for the sake of it.
Like, if you look at the Gales, just the result from the weekend, the Gales and Kiki, they shot the lights out. 4-12 to 3-10. I mean, that was
Now
super scoring.
let's press pause right there, Rory, because we've got the Gales selector mastermind here between us, right? Peter, what was the halftime score?
I think it was either 3-9 or 3-7 to 3 points.
Okay, Rory, just read out the full-time score there again.
4-12 to 3-10.
Okay, so obviously an entertaining second half.
End stuff, Peter?
Well, Kilkee didn't score their first goal until 10 minutes from time.
Okay.
At one stage we were 19 points.
He wasn't expecting to be blindsided like this. I'm loving this. Skirman.
There's one on either side of you.
Yeah, last 10 minutes were definitely...
Was the sweat rolling down your forehead, Peter?
There was a bit. Doesn't happen too often, but there was. Very happy with the first half. But look, I suppose we won eventually, you know. So we had 7 players making their championship debut.
Here we go. Yeah,
That's a fact, like, you know.
It was coming, Derek. It was coming.
The managerial. He's spoken to enough managers to know what to say.
So
he's been told to go into this podcast and say nothing.
It definitely. You'd learn a lot from the last 10 minutes, without a doubt.
You're glad to hear the final
That's
whistle.
really all I can say about that.
We won't ask you to say much more. Intermediate championships are fair to say at the moment. Front runners would probably include Kildysert and St. Brickens, just gone on the result. Obviously, Brickens were out their first game as well.
Brickens, very, very comprehensive win over Coolmeen. And the thing that Brickens have is they're very good forwards, and they've good players in other positions as well. But I think if you have good forwards, you can, you give yourself a platform. Kildysert always in control against Navan. That was the second game in Kilrush, and I did think it would be a bit closer. I thought Navan had a good league, like nearly got promoted from Division 3 up to Division 2, but Kildysert just looked. They've a nice mixture of very good young mobile players, and then some older players, maybe not as mobile but have played a lot of football,
a lot of experience,
physically strong, and calm. They have a good mixture. I think the two of them, Dura Bearfield, I think as well, should be. I suppose any of the clubs that came down from senior, you think should really rattle a semi-final spot at least. No, not all of them are going to get to the semi-final, but they should be thereabouts.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting final round, no doubt. Speaking of talking points, Rory, one of the big ones over the weekend, and it seems to be ironic that every time you come into studio on a Monday, there's been official, shall we call them, at the weekend.
You've had your dig at Peter. No, it's my turn.
We've been too nice for too long. A shortage of officials, firstly, I guess, was a major talking point. Just a couple of examples. No linesman for the Intermediate Championship game out in Gortine between Kilfenora and Wolf Tones. Shane Herr, Milltown native, but obviously officiating in Galway down doing the line for Niall Quinn in the park. We'll go back to Clare. Martin Downs, a newly trained official doing linesman for Jarlath Donnan, who, as we mentioned, ended up injured and had to hobble through. And it's like, it just gets the feeling championship games should have a full complement, shouldn't they?
When teams are training all year and they come to play their championship matches, they, without telling any tales out of school, they expect to see a full complement of officials. They expect to see 4 umpires. They expect to see a referee and 2 linesmen. Look, you'd think it's not too much to ask. Now, there was a lot of fixtures over the weekend, but generally, and it's kind of a rule of thumb that you go looking for your linesman when you get your appointment on the Monday night. Now, there is a WhatsApp group. It closed for a little while. It's open again. There's a WhatsApp group with the refs, and they put up who's around and who's not. You'll see who's refereeing. You see it in the champion on the Thursday, if you're as far as Thursday with no linesman. And if you're still stuck on the Friday, and what I used to do, and I often did it, was I togged out the likes of Niall Malone, Kevin Brennan, my own clubmen that had done the course, maybe not refereeing Niall Malone is now, but Kevin Brennan was it. Togged them out, put the gear on him, and bring him with you. For a championship match of these magnitude, you'd expect to have a standby referee with you. Now, I know something happened and Shane Herr did fill in, but Shane Herr was reffing in Galway, lads. He shouldn't have to fill in really in Clare. And probably the biggest game in the park at the weekend. Now, I know I was looking around the stand. There was referees there. There was referees that were on the list. There were, and there was one doing 4th official that could have done the line. Now, fair play to Shane. Thanks, Shane. But we have enough lads to cover those games. We really do. The situation with Jarlath, it's nearly inexcusable that you don't have anyone to replace yourself if you get injured. It's happened to me a couple of times at national level. Obviously, at national level, everyone was appointed from Croke Park. But he couldn't, he got injured, obviously, went down 5 or 6 minutes, and in fairness, he was helped out and stuff. But there was no one to take over from him. The man had to stand up, hobble away through, and fair play to him. But he's probably injured now for this weekend coming. And you should really have your 2 linesmen. You should really have them.
You mentioned a WhatsApp group, Rory, and I'm amazed that that's the structure. There is a committee, an administrative committee involved in Clare referees. Surely it should be centralised. Prioritise from top down.
Mm-hmm.
Cover your senior games. Cover your intermediate if you can. If there's going to be a shortage, with all due respects to what we'll call the championships at a lower grade, that should be the approach, surely.
Exactly. And you mentioned there the WhatsApp group or whatever, and we have an administrator. And in other counties, the referees get appointed. That's fine. But the linesmen are also appointed too. You mentioned a new guy. What was his name?
Martin Downs.
Martin Downs.
Well, there was a couple of new lads, Brian Shanahan and Joe Kelly from Clare
exactly.
as well. Yeah.
So wouldn't they love a text on a Tuesday morning? Are you available to be linesman in Cusick Park with whatever referee?
But what I'm saying is, and we've often spoke about referees having enough to do, particularly on match day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they have enough to be doing during the week as well.
Well, they do,
that should be taken out of their hands. They should be
already they have to make 4 phone calls to 4 umpires.
Yeah,
right.
So let them do that because they're guys you trust. That's fine. But in terms of linesmen and potential replacements and all that, that has to be centralised, surely.
Definitely. The list of referees is there. You see who's refereeing, you see when the games are on, and you appoint a linesman. Now, as regards expenses and stuff, the referee gets these expenses. But I know in other counties, they get 10 or 20 euros to do the line as well. And that will encourage young fellas to come and do the line. And then the games are covered. Do you know, it sounds simple. The technology is there, definitely. So we're sitting here doing a podcast in front of a camera or whatever. The technology is easy. You know, and I think the numbers are there. Whatever about junior A, junior B, if you get a referee for those, fair play. Okay, if he brings linesmen, fair play to him too. But definitely, senior championship and intermediate championship, they should be covered and centralised from either the referees group or the fixtures committee. I mean, there's enough of them on a Monday night to sit around the table to be able to do this as well. You know.
What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're a referee, surely you want your full complement with you, because if you're going making a contentious decision and there could be 700 or 800 people at a club game, you want to get it right. But
Peter, it brings freshness as well. If you have a referee every week that turns up with the same 2 linesmen, they go stale. If you have 2 different linesmen with a different referee the whole time, it keeps it fresh. It keeps their minds moving. You have a different lad giving you an insight, a different fella talking to you. It brings freshness to the whole thing, you know.
And I actually like the idea of some of the people that we mentioned there who were doing line over the weekend at some of the games. Martin Downs, Joe Kelly, Crusher from Clare, good name for a linesman. If you didn't
I
know
bring him every day.
Yeah, if you didn't know him, but you heard his nickname as Crusher, you probably wouldn't go claim.
You wouldn't be messing with him, no.
Brian Shanahan from Dunbeg, like they all know their football. They've all been involved at all kinds of different levels. And personally, I like that idea because even if they get a decision wrong, you unless it's absolutely
blatantly
unless
wrong,
it's blatantly wrong and you're certain that they're wrong.
Like a lot of the ones I used to make.
1 or 2, yeah.
There's an exclusive.
You kind of, I don't know, you accept it more. I always think, and I think we were on about this a couple of weeks ago, if there's good communication, nobody makes a mistake deliberately, and I think most people involved are reasonable on the line.
Like the referees,
maybe 1 or 2 weren't.
No names, Peter. No names.
But the referees are appointed on Monday night, so you know who's reffing on the Monday night. So the rest are not refereeing at the weekend.
And I have to say, Rory, I felt sorry for Jarlath Donlan because I mean, sure, anyone can get injured.
That's an awful experience.
And,
but imagine, lads, if that was a game that was going down the home straight. I mean, it was probably done and dusted at half time.
Imagine it was in the next round. Imagine it was in the final round, and we're talking about keeping a team in the championship or not. And you have a referee that is injured and has to literally stand around the middle of the field. Like,
I mean, I'd have to say,
and he's one of the fittest guys we have, you know.
Yeah. Solid too, Jonathan.
Solid.
I admire the fact that it looked as if he wasn't going to be able to walk at all for a while. You know, he was down for a good bit.
And what was the thinking then? What was the chat in the crowd like? Who is going to take over here?
That was it.
Did everyone turn to see who was doing the line?
Yeah, well, there was no one doing one line, and Martin Downs was doing the other. And we were kind of looking at the umpires and wondering any chance, but like the umpires weren't sprinting out to the middle of the field, like
no,
looking for the whistle.
Yeah, I know, I understand, yeah, and I do feel sorry for him. It's a terrible experience. happened to me above in Kerrigan Shannon in a qualifier one time. It's quite embarrassing walking off and being replaced, but anyway, at least there was a replacement that day. But poor Jarlath had to carry on at the weekend.
Anyone can get injured.
Anyone can get injured,
and you can't do anything about that. And I, to be honest, I admire the fact that he got up and kept going. He was hobbling, there's no, and I'd say whatever injury, well, it looked like an ankle injury.
It's an ankle injury. I spoke to him this morning. The swelling has gone down a little bit, but it's an ankle injury, and he'll be with the physio lads for a little while. So he's one more down, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. Lads, time catching up with us. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time talking on the football. We've got the hurling next week. We'll preview that in the paper. We'll get Fergie's thoughts on that, and we'll have him in studio here as well next week to go through all that as well. Loads more to come on the podcast. Don't go anywhere. You might have spotted in the background a certain little device. We've got the man behind it all coming up right after these. It's the Champion Sports Chat podcast, brought to you in association with Backballer. Check out backballer.com for more. Hi, welcome back to the Champion Chats podcast, and you can see in studio we've got a man that's no stranger to the cameras and indeed the spotlight as well. Noel Marshall, of course, of Backballer, based down in Shannon. He's our sponsor, as you know, of this week's Champion Sports Chat podcast. Noel, firstly, thank you. Great to have you on board. Backballer, I think there's not a single person in the country now that probably doesn't know what Backballer is and what it's about. Tell us about its origins.
The origins, Derek, they go back, I suppose right back 20 years ago maybe. I competed at a fairly decent level in middle distance athletics. They go right back to there really, but fast forward 15 years, I ended up chronically injured from that, and I went 15 years almost resigned to the fact that I wouldn't be active in sport or exercise again, because literally any time I would attempt to go back and do a bit, I'd end up back on the treatment table. It all came to a head then. It was 5 years ago now. I was 39. I was told I was going to require back surgery to deal with a herniation between the L5 S1, and it just set something off inside me that I just wasn't going to take this lying down. I figured I was too young. I heard some horror stories about how these things can go, so I just got really proactive, and I began to spend in up to 2 hours a day between stretching and rolling. I was involved with I was managing our local hurlers below in Wolftones, the under 16s, and I saw these young fellas coming in with foam rollers, and they just struck me as being clever, and 15 years prior we didn't have them, these were new. So I engaged with that, and I immediately, once I started to engage with it, I was feeling results, feeling release, and it was amazing. Such a simple thing, with a pipe with a bit of foam wrapped around it. You put it on the floor, you'd roll yourself on it in a process called self-myofascial release, and it started to bring release. And a month after I really engaged in this process, I knew I wasn't going to require a back operation. I suppose another few weeks went by then, and I was going great guns, but every time I'd be on the foam roller and I'd go from one end of the room to the next and back again, I'd say to it, wouldn't it be just a bit better if we could bring a bit more stability to it, and especially them for the back as well. I figured, if we had 2 rollers and we got them mounted on a plinth, that would be it. So I prototyped it. I'm a carpenter by trade, so it was easy enough for me to prototype such, and I tried it out, and just boom, immediately, I knew this had to be commercialized, because it was as good and better than what I even envisaged. And anyone I showed it to tried it, they were the same. It was, this is a winner all day long. So in 2000, I had to get tooling for it. Spent about 90,000 in tooling. So this is the Backballer here. The whole thing could be mass produced. So that was fine. I had the conviction to drive on with that, and I got tooled up, and I had our first shipment landed in to Smith, my unit in Smithstown in Shannon, in September of 2016. So and we launched it on the 1st of September with Sonia O'Sullivan up. Gerard Hartman, renowned physical therapist, was in to endorse it, put his stamp on it, and it's just rocked on from there, really. Yeah, and the bottom line is, like, it's we gave it socks, but it's standing the test of time. Like, anybody who will use it, love it. I had a text from Seamus Callan there earlier, just thanking me for how it's helped him this year, and I think he's probably favourite for hurler of the year, and he himself came through back surgery, so this played a massive part in his recuperation. And elite athletes, they know it and they appreciate stuff like this, and it's brought me back to being active now again and reasonable health again.
Is there any hope it might revitalise the likes myself and Peter here, who would be described as bad junior footballers in our day, I guess? Because, I mean, it's not just the backballer unit. I've seen you going out even to county teams doing workshops on how to use it, because I suppose that's as important as the device itself, isn't it?
Well, it's very easy to get these devices and use them once and say, Jesus, that thing hurts me, and kick it in under the stairs, and it never sees the light of day again, which happens with products. So the bit of education that comes with it is really paramount, so people know how to really gain from it. So yeah, when we do come in and work with teams, they always seem to get a gain from it. We've a good record.
And Noel, while you were inactive before you got the back problem solved, you lost fitness, I presume, and you were probably quite fit before that.
Well, I was very fit, yeah. 20 years ago, I was, I've a national 1500 metre under 23 title. I was near on 15 minutes for 5k. I was operating at a good level, running 100 miles a week. I was being coached by Peter Marr, who was a 2-time Olympic athlete, and he was just putting me through the rigour. But the whole recovery aspect wasn't there in sync with it, and ultimately the body broke down. And I'd stand up out of a chair or the car, like, and I had so much tightness in around the hips, especially, that it wasn't sustainable, and I broke down, and it all went. It went fairly quickly. Like, I went from being, well up the tree to.
Did you put on weight?
All piles of it, yeah. Over, I went from 60 kgs right out to 90. Now over the course of the 15 years, but had family, kids, and that, and just, I suppose, different priorities and that, and life can do that to you quite easily, So yeah, I put on a lot of weight, which always frustrated me as well, because growing up, like, I'd always have prided myself in being quite fit, I was, so yeah.
And you were able to get into cycling then? You were actually competing the weekend just gone?
Oh, I was, I just, I'm back doing a little bit of running, and I joined the local cycling club in Shannon this year, and I dived in at the deep end and got a racing license and said, sure, we'll try it out, and yeah, it's surprise, like, it's a ferocious slog, like, as is any competitive sport, but I'm in it, I'm enjoying it. I'm not competitive, not yet anyway. we'll see, perhaps we'll do a bit better next year, so I'm only kind of hanging on in terms of cycling, but yeah, I was down with the Munster champs yesterday. We knocked out 85 kilometres, and our club in Shannon had two great successes. Dermot Radford, he won the over 40s Munster champion, which is no mean achievement, because even over 40s you think, they're going over the hill. Not at this sport. Some guys, endurance sports like that, people sometimes can only, are still peaking right. Yeah.
So let's hope yet, Peter.
And I was giving mention as well to Stephen Teeling Lynch, a real great man below Shannon, to the triathlon club there, and does great work. He was second in the A2 category, which is the not the elitist division, but the next one down, and to come away with a silver medal there. and his story again is interesting in that he was at a very high level some years ago and went away from it with family and stuff, a bit similar to my own, and now he's really roaring back to life, and he's, as I know, in a big 2-day cycling championships below Charleville in Sunday week, the week after next. So I'd say between himself and Dermot now, they'll be in the shake-up when the medals are dished out there too.
So the roaring 40s, Noel, is a real thing. It's not just a figment of someone's imagination.
Well, Stephen, I think is I think I have a few years on Stephen. All right, I'm 44 now. He's 36. But yeah, no, it's great to see. It's great to see, like, because it just because people lose a bit of fitness, it absolutely, if you reset the mind 100%, you can come back and go at it again. Like, if the mind is there and you do the right stuff, the body will follow along.
Just at the other end of the scale, and because I know we're tight for time and we want to get your thoughts on what's next for the back bother, but just when you talk about the 44s, which isn't old, by the way, right? But for the younger fellas, the lads that are 15, 16, 17, are you finding that when you go and do these workshops, they're more aware of injury prevention, they're more aware of the importance of the foam rolling and all that?
I think they are now, Derek. Yeah, it's because they weren't really around for me, but now they are. They're fairly widespread, and you'd see the Liverpool, the Man Cities, all the elite clubs do it. Like, so if they see them doing it, they'll naturally gravitate towards doing it. And once the young athletes get on it and say they're the guys who really embrace it, because they have the agility to hop down and use it without giving it a second thought and really gain from it, and it helps them obviously when they win. And I suppose now as well with our more modern lifestyles where we tend to be more sedentary, we're sat a lot, be it at school, college, work, playing computer games on the phone, our bodies, tend to tighten just from being in these compromised positions. So yeah, all this stuff plays a vital role, not just rolling out, stretching, correct strength work, core strengthening, all that stuff, of course nutrition, vital elements in terms of preparation, and anybody looking to best themselves, they need to put all these things into their locker and give themselves every chance they can of reaching their potential.
What's the next step for the back bother? Where do you see this journey taking you?
Well, I personally feel if I don't sell 1 million of these, I won't have done my job as a marketing person. That's the.
Are you close?
No, not at all. No, we're coming on about 30,000 units at this stage. We've made very good traction in Ireland, but that's still it really. We're starting to gain some inroads into the UK, but we're still probably, it's gone about 50-50 at this stage, but up to now we were nearly selling more in Ireland than any other country, just by virtue of product awareness really. But we're just in the process of getting an infomercial through in the UK. It's one of these, I had great success with it there 10 years ago with my first product, the Bricky, the wall building device. People would have seen it. We bought a pile of airtime towards the 2008, 9, 10 and done great guns with that. So we're applying the same model here with this. We've produced a 30-minute infomercial, and we're just working with Clare to get it approved at this stage. And once that goes to here, we'd be confident it'll make good inroads into the UK then, and if it goes well there, then we can take it further afield.
And hopefully you get an bounce out of the Champion Sports Chat podcast as well. No,
absolutely.
We'd be delighted if that helps you bounce on. So you might have 2 customers here either side of you from what you said anyway.
We'll get 2 million, no, don't worry.
Good stuff, guys. Yeah,
that's the way it goes.
it's every bit matters.
Exactly. Well, no, listen, thanks for taking the time. I know you've a hugely busy schedule, so thanks for coming in to join us here this afternoon.
It's been a real pleasure.
And as you can see, Backballer there, backballer.com for more, and Noel and the lads will sort you out. That's all we've got time for on this week's Champion Sports Chat podcast. Pick up the paper Thursday, loads of good stuff in it. Review of the senior football, preview of the senior hurling, and loads more besides. Camogie, ladies football, soccer, it's all included. It's in your shops on Thursday. We're back again next Monday. We'll talk to you then. It's the Champion Sports Chat podcast, brought to you in association with Backballer. Check out backballer.com for more.